my attention got fractured, right? Or I'll be listening, for like 10 minutes and then I'll pull my phone out and scroll on TikTok. And then it's like, wait a minute, I was just reading a book, I was just listening. Now it's like I go turn the TikTok off and go back to the book. But now it's like it's in the middle of a sentence, and now I'm like rewinding it because I realized that, okay, well, now I kind of forgot.
Yeah, what was the last thing I actually heard?
Yeah, so it that fractured attention. I picked up a physical book the other night, and I'm reading the book, and I'm like, 2 pages, and then I'm like, something just popped into my head, and I pulled my phone out and I started Googling something, and it's like, stop, just sit and read. And sometimes, I believe we mentioned it on a previous episode, just the constant consuming information and not sitting with it. Now reading, obviously you're consuming information while you're reading, but it's like even just focusing on one sort of information to consume.
Yeah, like I told you, I mentioned that my even when I read books, it's much like me and having an internet browser open. Because whenever I have a browser open, I'll be reading an article, and then there'll be the hyperlink in the article. So I'll right click on the hyperlink, open a new tab, and then by the time I get to the article, I got 7 or 8 tabs open now, and each one of those has hyperlinks to other articles. And depending on how interesting the source article was, I may end up with like 12 tabs open of all these different things. And then I'm like, and then I'll just leave the tabs open and go away and go do something else. But even around here, I'm rereading The Arrogant Ape. I'm going through that. I've got The Shallows that I'm halfway through. The Blind Spot I'm reading. The World Beyond Your Head, the Matthew Crawford book that I mentioned, I got that one going. Upstairs, I have a couple of other ones. Anti-intellectualism in American Life, because of certain things that are happening in the world right now. That's a book that I read like 30 years ago that I'm reading again. Mainly because I want to make sure I have the thread of that as it travels through our Ishmael mother culture propaganda story. So, but all that stuff is going on. And so if I'm in the kitchen, I can grab a book. If I'm in here, I can grab a book. If I'm upstairs in my office, I can grab a book. And then I'm like, yeah, what the hell was I thinking about? And you alluded to it, is that sometimes when you put the book down, the best thing to do is to not turn the TV on, not grab your phone, just sit there and think about what you just listened to or read, even for only 5 minutes before you drive yourself to distraction on something else. Give it a chance to settle,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big problem in general.
Not just for you either.
No, and processing, because it's almost like I guess if you don't ever process, you don't ever stop and think about all the information that it's kind of hard to know like what you like actually think. Like, what do I actually think? Like, and the thing is you see it a lot. I see it a lot with these little, like, part of it is the influencer culture, or the which is born out of capitalism. Like, people want to make money, right? So I become an influencer because I want to make money. But you have these little influencer beefs, or it's like, or somebody's calling out another influencer because they're not being consistent. Because ultimately they never really sat and thought about the thing. At least this is what I think is happening. You're consuming. You make a TikTok or a YouTube video outraged or your opinion on something, but it's ultimately, and then later on you end up having a different TikTok or YouTube or whatever that kind of contradicts what you said before. And I think it's partly because you've never really sat and thought about like what you actually think.